Yes! Yes. This is the type of music that gets me excited to make videos. What's up everybody, this is Brian, back with another late as fuck electronic music review. This time we're talking about Tansuri, the new EP from Tutara Peak, the most recent alias of British producer Harvey Carter. I was gonna make a different video, but after I first heard this, I had to put that shit on hold so that I could spend 10 or 20 minutes just raving about this thing. Because over the past couple weeks, I've spent a lot of time just combing through electronic music on Spotify in search of shit to talk about, which really does wear on you after a while. But when you find something as good as this, that is what makes it all worth it, honestly. The lighting is better during the day, so if I'm going to keep up this bit of drinking while reviewing, I kind of have to day drink. I'm going to be burping in this one because I'm drinking beer. Oh yeah. So I guess I've been a casual fan of Harvey Carter for a little while now. I mean, I really enjoyed a lot of his releases as part of Echo, the Yoja EP in particular. But after that duo split up, I never felt super urgently compelled to check out either Harvey or Jack Angel's subsequent solo projects. Part of the reason why this review is so late. But now that I've listened to this, I have realized the depth of my mistake, because this is absolutely the best thing I have ever heard from him in any capacity. I mean, I'm blown away by this. Like, the neurobass and EDM influences from Echo are just totally gone here in favor of these lush, Vangelis-inspired orchestral electronic hybrid compositions. And texturally, it's just incredible. I mean, there's so many acoustic and electronic layers just weaving in and out of these epic-length songs. And I really admire his ability to bring together all of these different sounds, including a number of collaborative musicians as well, while keeping the sound of the EP as a whole very cohesive. He obviously had a very clear musical vision for this project and is definitely in full control of his creativity here, which is seriously impressive given the grand scope of the music on this project. And there's definitely a lot more that I could talk about in a general sense that's brilliant about this EP, but it's probably better if I illustrate with specific examples, so let's just go ahead and get right into the track by track. Cloud Construct. Oh, shit. Alright, don't put your hands on the table. That's what I've learned just now. So, given how short this one is, it would be really easy to just dismiss it as an intro track and move on. And considering that it's very ambient and doesn't really have a distinctive melodic hook running through the whole thing, it did take me a couple of listens to fully appreciate this one. But now that I've listened through the whole thing several times, it's become clear to me just how well this sets the tone for the whole project. The first half is just this big build with these sweeping synth textures and orchestral hits. Like I said, it's very reminiscent of some of those old Vangelis film scores. And then the bottom suddenly drops out about halfway through. We have this massive wash of sound just abruptly dissolving into these tiny, far-away sounding pitched-up vocal samples, and it's a really great example of something that he does incredibly well throughout the EP, which is utilize dynamic contrast, which, in the context of the loudness wars of today's music, sounds very refreshing and makes for some really goosebump-inducing moments, this being one of them. And the second half brings everything back down from that peak that we got around a minute in, and we're left with these ambient woodwind sounding textures that are really beautiful as well. And that's another thing this song does that just continues throughout the whole EP. He continues to bring in and feature new sonic textures that we haven't heard yet, which keeps the EP super engaging to listen to throughout its runtime, which, considering the 30-minute length and the overall cohesiveness of the creative vision, might be the most impressive thing about this whole project. That sucked. So then we transition into Light Fills the Room, which is probably the closest we get to a straight-ahead dance track on the whole EP, with its kind of broken, two-step inspired beat and the chopped-up, sample-based instrumental textures. And it's a collaborative track with Dutch producer Zes, I hope I'm saying that right, which, based on his previous work, might lead one to expect this track to be more vocal-centric than it is. There are vocals on this one, but they're pretty decidedly not the focus. They only appear a couple times throughout the 6-minute song, and they're really only serving as just another color in this lush tapestry of sound that Harvey's weaving here. And when the vocals do arrive at around 3 minutes in, the production becomes very sparse and dry, and it just feels like a nice anchor point in what would otherwise be a very sprawling song. And as Zest sings the titular lyrics, the vocal layers spread out and become more airy to really mimic this concept of light filling a room. It's a really great moment of production and songwriting coming together.
I'm lost, whenever I'm lost, your light fills the room. Your light fills the room.
And then the beat comes back in and the whole thing just opens up into this really funky groove with a lot more sampled guitar, percussion, and a really awesome synth solo as well as some live drums, if I'm not mistaken. A little bit of foreshadowing there. And then the vocal hook brings it back around at the end, and the whole thing dissolves again into this beautiful ambient wash of synths and vocals, really just filling up the stereo image to complement the lyrics. And then a little quick piano outro to seamlessly get us into the next track. So on my first listen through the EP, this was really where the whole thing just jumped up to another level for me. It's a collaboration with Lou Rhodes, who at this point is... So it's a collaboration with Lou Rhodes, who's a pretty well-established voice in British electronic music. It's the only vocal-centric track on the EP, and holy shit does this feel like a match made in heaven. That unique, quavering quality that her voice has is really accentuated here, and it's an incredibly arresting and dramatic vocal performance that just hooks you from the very first words.
There's a time when life falls in between, and a place where love flows endlessly.
Both the instrumental and the vocals start with so much tension and tentativeness, and by the time the beat comes in and the refrain hits, it just feels like this incredible release.
In your arms, I'm braver than I know. We are a fire in the dark.
God. So good. And the lyrics are consistent with the themes laid out in the previous track, this idea of finding yourself and finding your way through someone else. And they build that concept up to this epic scale, which on paper might look over the top and melodramatic, but with this vocal performance and this lush production, the song just becomes incredibly beautiful and chilling. If you're a fan of that one album Fantano gave a 10 to, I think you'll really enjoy this one in particular as well. Hey, look at that, we're halfway through and my beer is gone. Oh, am I white trash yet? It feels so much less classy drinking a fucking beer than it did like drinking whiskey in the last video. This just hurts, honestly. Like, not hurts, it feels bad, you know? So you know what that means. In the future, it's hard liquor only. So, anyway, Adam Surrexi. From here, Harvey starts to take things in a darker direction, and the first half of this thing is really a masterclass in how to take a great melodic idea and get the most mileage out of it possible. This is another song that's almost 6 minutes long, and every single melodic motif in here gets introduced in the first minute. Whether that's the main guitar riff, the synth arps, those glass bell textures, you name it. He strategically adds and removes them, all while ramping up the intensity of the drums and these background synth pads. And speaking of drums, holy shit. The second half of this is definitely the darkest moment on the EP as the synth layers start to drift out of tune, these really ominous low-end rumblings start to come in, and the drums start to ramp up in intensity again. And then it turns into this really kick-ass drum solo, which I was not expecting at all, because even though these really flashy drum parts have kind of been a staple of Harvey's music ever since Echo, I don't think he's ever done a song where the drums themselves become just the sole feature. Because usually in this type of music, no matter how intense the rhythm, the drums tend to get relegated to background rhythm in favor of the more sound designy synth stuff. So just letting a real live drummer just go ham here is a very welcome change of pace. where do you get these drums, man? Like, if you're watching this, drop me the Instagram link of your drummer, because I need to know. And the solo is incredibly musical too. Like, it gradually makes use of more and more toms in order to keep the intensity building, and with those atonal synth textures just rising with it in the background. And an album that's honestly full of these, like, holy shit moments, this one definitely takes the cake for me. And then the piano at the end just gives a nice little sense of closure to the whole thing before we move on to the next one. So this one, interestingly enough, sounds like a Daft Punk homage, which is an influence that I don't think we've really heard in Harvey Carter's music up to this point. And given that fact, along with the overall aesthetic of the EP, I'm not sure that that was 100% the intention for this track, but it's pretty undeniable to my ears. It opens with this vintage electric piano arp, which pretty quickly settles into this laid-back house groove. And the synth arp that comes in at around 3 minutes or so sounds very reminiscent of Voyager, combined with, again, the live drums, which come in at around the last minute or so, I think. Gives me big Motherboard vibes. Big string crescendo and abrupt cutoff at the end is almost the exact same ending as Touch. But although those influences are definitely there, it doesn't feel like it's ripping off any one track in particular. And the references that I mentioned are from the more cinematic side of Daft Punk, so it is consistent with the vibe of this EP. And the bird sounds that we get in the background, the big synth sweeps, and the live drums do help massage this in with the rest of the track list and keep it from sounding too out of place. And thanks to that 4/4 house beat, it's probably the easiest listen on the EP. I mean, just super enjoyable all the way through. And for being a pretty chilled out and subtle song for most of the runtime, it does have a nice sense of climax at the end, which is very satisfying. So ultimately, rather than just coming off as an imitation, it does sound like an organic new sonic dimension for this EP and for the sound of Tutara Peak in general. Last one. Yeah, so this is definitely an epic closer with those Vangelis type orchestral leanings really coming back in full force here. And if you watched my Feed Me review, you may remember how I talked about how awesome it is when a song can pull off a gradual build over the course of the entire runtime. Well, this one right here. It starts off so small and simple by bringing back those little glass bell sounding textures, and it gradually adds on more and more notes, so what sounded like the melody at the beginning turns out to be just a harmony for another melody that comes in, and then even that whole thing just kind of gives way and becomes background texture for this really sweeping synth solo, and the way that builds up with the chords is just perfection. And then finally the low end fills out and we get those big orchestral hits again that just perfectly complement those epic pitch-bending synths. And then in the last minute or so, that low end tightens up and becomes more rhythmic, which really gives the song that big final push to the end that it needs. It feels very triumphant compared to the two tracks that preceded it, and it's just a super satisfying closer for the whole EP. So yeah, overall, Tansuri is by far the best work I've heard from Harvey Carter in any capacity, whether that's as part of Echo or in his solo projects. Like, I really can't stress enough how blown away I am by this. And I've been starting to think about, like, year-end best-of lists for electronic music recently. I don't know if I'm actually going to end up doing it, but if I do, this is going to be high up there, for sure. I mean, it feels so epic and cinematic. The writing and the production are just working so well together. It's engaging on first listen and rewards repeated listening and deep dives like this. It's really everything a work of music should be, to tell you the truth. So if you haven't given this a listen, please do so, because none of these songs have more than 10,000 plays on Spotify, and they certainly deserve more love than that. So go check it out, and let me know what you think. Did you enjoy this as much as I did? Which track is your favorite? You know, they all really have something unique to add here, so I'm definitely curious to get more people's thoughts on this. And let me know what you thought of this review. Like, I know nobody asked for this, I know this is far from the biggest project I could be covering right now, but I honestly just got so excited when I first listened to this that I just had to make a video about it. And of course, in addition to the big stuff like Feed Me, I would really love to be spotlighting smaller electronic projects like this as well. So definitely let me know if this is something you'd like to hear me talk more about. And if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications, and letting me know what all in the spectrum of electronic music you'd like to hear me talk about next. And hopefully, I will see you next time.